Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tried and True, a podcast hosted by Delaware Warmachine. I'm your host, Paul.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Erica.
This is going to be our first podcast release for the year 25. It's nice to have both of you on again.
Thanks for having us.
Are you hosting us now? Is that how this works?
I don't know how it really works anymore. I just kind of show up and, talk to you two. So what we wanted to do on this episode was Erica and Andy ended up going off to CaptainCon. They had a really good turnout, so they were going to go ahead and debrief like how this CaptainCon was different. I believe it was like Andy's second or third, and I think Erica's first. So a bit of a perspective from like a reoccurring attendee and a newcomer. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. But before we get started, let's go ahead and just do a couple of shout outs. So thanks to More Than Dice for giving us a platform to go and sharing all the good stuff. And for all the patrons on Patreon, thank you so much for your continued support. So for the outline, Eric and Andy, if you want to go ahead and just talk about CaptainCon, because correct me if I'm wrong, CaptainCon is, aside from LVO, is one of like the first big scene tournaments for Warmachine that happens at the beginning of the year. And then also this was like a week or two before like the new Steamroller packet dropped.
It was like a day or two.
It was like
before.
2 days. Yeah, it was like 2 days right after the packet dropped, so nobody knew what they were doing.
Yeah, so like how did that overall like affect your thoughts on like doing the list building even before going up to CaptainCon and talking about it? But like what were your thoughts? Just to kind of use it as a feeling the water, see what everybody's playing?
We really didn't have a chance to make a game plan. Like, it's not having played on any of those scenarios before, it's sort of hard to guess about what you really need. I do like that every single scenario has a 50 to score, so battle groups are a little bit more incentivized, which is cool. But yeah, the scenario packet itself is still really new to me. I'm still muddying my way through it.
Yeah, so Rick rode up with us and was kind of going over. We were going over the scenarios in the car on the ride up to Rhode Island. For me, with my list, I was just rolling what I had been playing in the most recent Null League. Shout out Tyrants on the Field. So I just kind of use that as a springboard, and yeah, I didn't really make many changes going into the weekend.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and just talk a little bit about CaptainCon. So Andy, is this year 2 or 3 for you?
This is 3.
Okay, and this is
4.
Erica's.
I think this is 3.
Okay, and so how is like was this year like similar to the last one? Was it different like overall? Like, because you're kind of like coming back to it. What was your overall impression?
The convention itself is very, they do the same thing every year. They're not deviating much. A lot of the same vendors, a lot of the same stuff that's in the same spot because it works for them. It's a solid small con. The one thing about CaptainCon that's always a little bit weird to me is they always have a lot of empty tables, and I'm like, if you have some things that sell out and other things that don't sell out, there's always just space that's just not used, and I'm not sure whether that's people not showing up but buying tickets, or they just want a lot of open play space. I'm not sure, but yeah, CaptainCon is a really nice time. It's a really cool way to start the year off and get sort of the lay of the land, I guess.
And then Erica, because this was your first time doing CaptainCon, how does it compare to other ones you've been to, like Adepticon, Warfare Weekend, Nova?
CaptainCon was a lot of fun. It's a much smaller con than, let's say, Adepticon, for example, or probably LVO. Yeah, definitely LVO. I kind of like it. It's a little bit more intimate in that way, where it's not as expensive as some of the bigger conventions, and it's got a very chill vibe to it. I like it.
For us. We drove, so there's that.
Yeah, and we got to Rick road tripped with us. We got to go to the Whimsy Village in Mythic, Connecticut. That was really cool. Yeah, it was fun. Mystic, Connecticut.
Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about some of the statistics or numbers in comparison, because looking at it, I think if I saw correctly, there were 6 pools for the IG qualifier. Andy, do you remember how many players played last year?
I think it was definitely maxed out last year, but I don't remember the exact number of people. I think they gave them some extra space this year.
Okay.
It was a very similar footprint, but we were back to back to back. That was just table. There was no space to put any of your stuff down, unfortunately. So it was They had us crammed in as tight as we could in a very similar footprint that they had last year.
And is it a similar case in the team event as well? Because I think I saw there were 16 teams total.
hmm Yeah, I think I don't remember if there were a full 16 teams last year. I'm not sure.
It
I don't think there was.
I really like the pod method for these large qualifiers or large steamrollers. So with the IG for the qualifier for Masters, they were 8-man pods, so it was a max 3-round event, which was perfect. So we got off pretty early in the evening. It was a little bit of a slow start when kicking off each round because the scenarios, 3 of them were brand spanking new. So Seth and David, special thanks to them for hosting an awesome weekend, gave us a little bit of extra time to adjust to some of these changes.
That's good. And then overall, how's everyone's like reception when trying to learn the new scenarios? Was it like bumbling through it, or were people relatively like was it intuitive that you found?
I think for the most part we played it right. I think this packet might be, not to get ahead of ourselves, might be a little bit more cheesable than the last packet, but that might just be because some of us know what we're doing, some of us don't know what we're doing. We're just kind of playing around with it. But I think there's some nuances to this packet that might be a little odd.
It's almost like, uh, like Andy was saying, some of these scenarios are a little bit more vulnerable to be exploited with the cheddar cheese than last year's packet.
Okay, well, was there anything like specific about CaptainCon that you wanted to share, or any like the highlights, good games, or do you want to just get right into the Steamroller pack and just talk about what you found or what your thoughts are about it?
Let's talk about games. The tables themselves were really full this year. They did a really good. David and Seth did a really good job making sure that there was very few like barren wastelands with nothing on them. There was a lot of terrain.
Can I ask the usual guidance, or at least this stuff in Steamroller pack? It's like 1 hazard and 4 line of sight blockers. Were they relatively to that formula,
I think
like
so,
plus
yeah.
or minus a
I
hazard?
think they're
Okay.
pretty close. They average between like 12 and 15 pieces of terrain, and I think the packet recommends 10 to 14. So
Yeah.
I don't think they were too far off.
Okay.
Those giant logs were a little skewy, but it's always cool to have something that's unique on the table too.
Or is
Uh,
that something new that they just like put out this year? Because I don't think I ever remember seeing the logs at like Boca Brawl before.
so
I
what
don't
they
remember logs either.
No, what they did this year was Seth and David wanted to make the tables more thematic. So the tables came in groupings of 3. You had one that was like a farmland themed table, one that was in a forest, and then a wasteland table.
That's cool.
Yeah, so for each 3-man team subsection, you'd have 3 separate biomes essentially.
Okay. No, that's pretty neat. So it's similar to like what I think we kind of try to pull off at the Sussy Scuff. Okay, so then how about the actual games themselves?
I had some really good games. Rabido housed me with Calder. It was a really interesting scenario with so it was best laid plans, and the 40 mils disappeared, and the scenario just died. There was no way to win on scenario, so we just kind of had to sort of just like punch each other in the middle until one of us ran out of models. I played a really good game into my last game of the weekend was into Michael. I can't remember his last name, but into Infernals. We came down to the wire. We were both like sub 1 minute. It was Shadow Tongue versus Agathon. We were just trying not to die from each other's spell slinging. That was on Trench Warfare, which is a really weird scenario because if you just kind of sit back and sit on your 40, it's really hard to get to you because it gives your own 40 and your own 50 give you blast resistance and cover. So like dealing with your stuff at range if you're just sitting on your own objectives gets a little bit weird.
My games were all excellent. Everybody that I got to interact with and hang out with, play games with, everybody was super cool and excited to be there. It was very good energy, even for a competitive environment like a convention like this.
Mhm.
The atmosphere was incredible, so that was awesome. I played against a lot of Brine Bloods.
Well, you got a lot of practice, so it's fine. You're okay.
Just, it was, I think, I played 7 games over 2 days, and I think like 3 or 4 of them were into Brian Bloods players.
You steamroll all the Brian Bloods players, lady. You make them all sad.
We play a lot of Brian Bloods and Dusk in the house, but yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. I got to see Ragemonger a lot and Firequill, two casters that Andy doesn't play, so that was fun to see them on the table. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more on the scenarios when we get to that part of the discussion, but I wanted to thank everybody that came and said hey and played games. I learned a whole lot. It was just a great time, so I want to thank everybody for that.
Oh, I wanted to add one more game. My game into Rico was really, really fun. we this was on Payload, and we were doing the weird little dance where am I putting my 50? Am I gonna give it to you or not give it to you? Or am I gonna try to score? Am I not gonna try to score? At the very end, I think Rick had like a minute and a half left, and I just threw my Abyssal King at him, and I said, "Here, chew on this for a minute and a half. I got nothing left, so here, eat this, and then hopefully you clock. We'll see how it goes."
All right. Well, we keep on talking about the Steamroller 25, so I think we should just get right into it. Unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about with CaptainCon.
The Nerf battles were fun.
At night, Portal Dave went and bought a bunch of Nerf guns, so we had like a little shooting gallery with Nerf guns at night after the games were done. It was a lot of fun. I would say it is a great chill con. So if you're somebody that's in the Northeast area or you don't get the opportunity to travel to a lot of cons, I would say this one is a very welcoming. It's a lot more affordable than other conventions out there, and it was a really good time.
Yeah, if you're anywhere in the Northeast Corridor and within drivable distance to Warwick, Rhode Island, this is a good one to go to. It's very there's the barriers to entry are not very high for this one.
That's great to hear. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the spicy topic now about Steamroller 25. So, the packet dropped. We saw that they removed a couple scenarios, added some brand new spanking ones. So, let's go ahead and talk about the scenario discussions to begin with. So, removal, they got rid of Recon, Battle Lines, and Invasion. And I guess we kind of know, like, with like the previous packets, they would usually do rotations, get rid of scenarios, and, bring in new ones. What were your thoughts about the removal of these three? Did you think that there was anything that they did right, things that they did like poorly, or things that's like, this kind of works, but we need to improve upon it, and that was seen in the new packet?
So Recon that was a variable scenario between like being really dead and being kind of wide and interesting if the flags got put in weird spots. I think that Best Laid Plans kind of takes Recon's place, but in a more in an unpredictable manner. Just because like the scenario could be really dead or could get really wide. It's sort of whatever that D3 rolls says. It gets a little wonky. I really liked Battle Lines. I think the biggest problem with Battle Lines was everybody forgot to move stuff when they were supposed to move stuff. And even when they did remember to move stuff, it was a little bit gamey where it was like, oh, I'm going to move it like 0.1 inches towards you and 2.9 inches that way. So it was the same on both sides, which I always like. I like the scenarios to be mirrored, so that's cool. But that's probably the only one I'm sad to see gone. Invasion was very snowbally. Like Invasion, if you were able to dominate on scenario early, there really wasn't any coming back. You'd getting that 40 dragged out from under you was very punishing.
Yeah.
I think I follow your same feeling on them. So Recon, I always found was boring. That was like the one that there wasn't a lot of elements to it, right? Or it was just very static, like nothing moved.
It was a 30, a cash, and I think a flag, and that was about it.
You know why I feel like that one didn't speak with me? It felt very reminiscent of like Mark III stuff where it was just like the zones where nothing moved. So it just felt like you could have just removed the objective, like 50 mils, 40, whatever, and just put the zones back, and it wouldn't look all that different. I mean, it's still Recon at that point.
Yeah, you got to remember too that these zones are much smaller than those old Mark III zones. There kind of has to be more of them for more pieces of the table to matter.
True, but I mean, I guess where it was is like, it's like the MacGuffins that we're fighting over, like, why am I in this scenario fighting for this thing? So it felt very much reminiscent of that. I'm like, I don't understand why my army would be here doing this fight. I agree with Battle Lines where I would always forget moving the things all over the place and it got really wonky. But Invasion, I think thematically, I really like the idea that you're trying to go in, pull that, special MacGuffin like out from like your enemy's, area, and just in order to go and like win the battle. I just always like that one a lot. But you're
It
right
is a
about it
little
being
bit like
snowball.
it's like a little bit like a capture the flag kind of thing. And
Yeah,
I think they hit that note with color guard,
yeah.
in more of a way that doesn't snowball the game as much.
Yeah,
Where color guard is when you move your opponent's flag, there's some strategy and some interesting dynamics there.
to echo you guys, battle lines was my favorite scenario from last year as well, but like everybody else, also forgot to move the objectives. Invasion, like I think the big snowball thing that came from that, if you were first player, you basically felt like you were playing not to lose. And because if you were second player, it was just like a lot easier to pull, especially the 40s back. I hated going first on that scenario. It just felt like I was running things across the table to try and contest and just
Just throwing your attrition advantage just out the
yeah,
window. Yeah.
exactly. So I'm glad to see that one go.
Okay, so let's go and talk about the new packet scenarios. I want to start off with actually the ones that were already in 24. So we'll talk about Wolves, Payload, and Two Fronts, and we'll just talk about like the updated languages that they use. So with Wolves, they haven't really changed all that much aside from the like how you end up doing the scoring, like that big score, the
Well,
being
they also made a cache a flag, so
oh
made it
okay.
a little bit more interesting too.
Okay, but the actual language, because I even remember that the language before of like whoever pushed it further up versus like you have to get it to the specific spot. I personally like that a little bit more because it's a lot easier if it's like you either did it or you didn't.
Yeah, so they slowed down wolves essentially. It's much harder to get the jackpot now, because I think the way it's interpreted is it must be completely past the 50, the
The
50 yard
the
line
24,
basically.
the 24 inches.
Yeah, 24-inch line. And that requires you to push it 4 times.
Hmm.
So it delays that a little bit. So there's no times where you've maybe pushed it 2 or 3 times, your opponent only pushed it once, and then you auto jackpot at the end of 4.
Hmm.
So there's a little bit of a game there of like, do you bother to push it? You keep it harder to contest if you can contest your opponents all game. It gets a little bit weird. So I think Wolves in general is slower than it was last year.
Okay, so then what about with Payload? So at least with Payload, they swapped out the amount of points that you get for actually blowing up the other terrain objective. And then
Uh,
didn't they also like change how terrain objectives work in this packet or made it more clear? It's
yeah,
like if you're a forest, you have to be within it now.
Yes, so
yeah.
all terrain isn't the same now. So if it's an obstruction type terrain, you're essentially contesting or scoring or jackpotting or whatever the thing it is within 3 inches of it. So it's
Hmm.
standardized that way. But if it's terrain that you can enter, like a forest or a cloud or a pond or whatever, you have to actually be inside of it. You can't be base to base with it. You can't be 3 inches from it. You have to be at least towing it.
Hmm.
I think one of the issues with so on a positive, the change for the jackpot is good where it's not I think it was 5 points last year. The issue you run into is you can't score your own flag in this scenario. And once you push the 50 and it's gone, the only thing you can score is the 40. So you kind of run into a little bit of that Recon Mark IV feel a bit where there's not a lot of points to grab on the board for scenario once those 50s go.
Especially if you're incentivized to be cagey with your 50 mil and try to not get it contested. There's really there's since the flags aren't scoreable, there's really not a lot on this table when it comes to the scenario.
I just remember like hearing so many people like put Payload on the chopping block, get rid of it because of the. Do you like still think it still suffers from like overall? Do you think it's not gonna see Steamroller 26 now?
I don't think it in any way has the same problems as last year, but it is, I believe, a very slow scenario right now.
Yeah, I agree with Andy. I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about this. My hot take is I think the best laid plan scenario is going to be this year's payload, essentially. Um,
We're giving them all the fair shake. We're not getting rid of anything yet.
but yeah, payload is much more stagnant of a scenario now than it was last year.
Okay, and then help me out with Two Fronts. Changes for that one.
So the second player used to get an extra 30 mil to score, so they sort of had
Yeah.
an easier little extra point to score.
Sure.
That has changed to the second player now has a flag dead center in the middle of the board.
Right.
In some ways, that is more easily contestable, but when you can drag it back to a piece of terrain that's close to your 50 or close to your 40, I feel like that's an even bigger swing towards second player. I don't have a good judge on two fronts yet.
With all like the shifts away from the 30 mils, like so the 30 mil is not part of the packet because I think if I remember the article, it said when they were creating the packet, only one scenario had a 30 mil, and it just felt silly to keep it, so they just got rid of it to make it universal across. So it's like not like the 30 mils are gone forever; they're just gone in this iteration of these packets.
They essentially they got rid of all the 20 mils, right? So the 30 mils, the cash, and now.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I meant like the 30 mil objective. Like, there's no solo scoring objectives anymore.
Correct. The only thing solos can score is just be part of a flag score.
Yeah, so like do you think that's going to be affecting list building overall? Because I think like with like Orgoth, like I want to keep on those like beefy solos that help me out, but it's weird that they're not going to be helping out with some scenario presence at this point.
I'm still taking solos. They, like Andy was saying, they're great. They can hold flags. They still have unique abilities to help empower the rest of your army. They also make great contesting pieces. Like I can just yeet a solo up the board and not have to commit a unit or a jack.
Yeah, it's much easier.
So that's
say
good to me.
Yeah, say for specifically my faction, it's much easier to throw a Fugue Walker up at 4 points than it is to give you a whole unit, right? So
Yeah.
I think solos definitely have their place. There are some solos that are better at sitting back and just helping score a flag. I take a rock in every list. Thank you, Fire Guardian, to help me score a flag and just sit there. So yeah, you're still going to see solos. They just don't specifically have an objective just for them anymore, which I don't think really affects list building all that much. Like if you're going to sit your Groton Keeper next to your caster, that Groton Keeper might as well be towing a flag somewhere, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so how about your new ones? You got Color Guard, Best Laid Plans, and Trench Warfare. Do we want to go with like the best of these three, or do you want to just go like in order?
Let's go in order.
Okay, so with Color
no
Guard,
idea what's best.
it's fine. So with the Color Guard, that's the one where you pick a terrain piece, a fur flag, but then it's constantly moving, and it can't be the same terrain piece that was previously picked at any point. So if you moved it during round 3 and it's like round 5, you can't pick that terrain. Is that right on the interpretation?
Yeah, essentially. So you choose your flag at the beginning of the game, right? So
Yeah.
you're probably going to pull it back to somewhere close to your deployment. I think this scenario might be the most gamey scenario where if you get the right table side or you're able to go first and push up the board quickly and start contesting things, there's I don't want to say decided at the die roll, but there are certain tables where this could be the case where say one side's flag is never able to move and you just score 2 free because the flag's worth 2 in the scenario. You score 2 free points, but you're able to move your opponent's flag multiple times towards yourself. I think that's a massive advantage.
So then for like TOs, because we talked offline about this, what would they need to go do to make sure that that doesn't happen? Like, is it that like the tables are going to look more universal? Like they should have like a particular layout to not let that happen?
I would say that the use of more scatter terrain would help, but we found out at CaptainCon that if a flag moves to a piece of scatter terrain and then someone destroys that scatter terrain, that flag is now stuck. It will never move. So that can kind of be another way to game it, where you just run over your own flag with an 80 mil, and now all of a sudden you've captured your flag and left and kept it back there. That's the way it was interpreted at CaptainCon. I don't know whether that's going to be the final judgment on that, but
Or it might be like a ruling where they like update the language where you can't choose scatter terrain for this.
like I said, I have no idea. But I think it is cool that flags can now be scatter terrain and hazards now. So it gives you more options for where the flag can be, especially because you're forced to pick a piece of terrain. You can't just leave your flag as just a flag in any scenario.
So do you think that would like make for negative play experiences? Because like again, I've not played Color Guard. I feel like if I were to go up against someone who would know the game and would pick something like that, and then I wouldn't feel like I feel slighted, but it's like it doesn't feel good. It doesn't leave a pleasant taste in my mouth for that.
I think, yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, too. I agree with you, Paul. I think color guard, it's a very live, it's a very spicy scenario, and I think the more, I think Blightbringer said, Ryan, it's kind of like a mini game inside the game, and if you can map that out like quick in your head and you're familiar with uh like terrain placement and the possible jumps. Like whenever I play this scenario, I look at the table and I'm already mapped out where I'm moving my opponent's flag, or because like if I flag something, my opponent can't. You guys were saying before, you can't ever have a flag share a piece of terrain or go back to a terrain. So you can get really cutesy with it and block ways for the flag to go. Yeah, this is this could go pretty deep. This rabbit hole on this one can go pretty deep.
This is
Uh,
definitely the scenario that requires the most knowledge of this scenario in order to not get screwed on it, I think.
mhm.
Okay. All right, well, let's go to the next one. Best laid plans.
Boo! Boo
Best-
this plan.
So here's my thing with it is that we're going for a competitive game and they were trying to remove randomness from scoring, like consistency. And I remember it's like fog, like it even says like in the Steamroller packet, like you do not roll for fog disappearing because it's supposed to stay there the whole entire time. It just kind of felt really weird when I read the rules and saying that a thing that can score will now disappear. Even before
I
scoring, but still, like
I w-
you're
I w-
removing a thing.
yeah, I want to give them some credit. If you're going to have stuff disappear, I think they did it the best way that you can do it, in that it happens before scoring and before you've committed too much to any one part of the table. So it happens right after the second player's first turn. So you basically have to spread out, find a spot on the table where you want to be, dictated by where your opponent's army is and all that, and then adjust based on what the scenario does to you. I don't think that's the worst way to do it. I think, but the problem becomes, I think, depending on what disappears, the scenario kind of stops being a scenario. And I think maybe that's intended, maybe that's not. I'm not sure, but it definitely changes the game. I know Erica, both of our games that we played at this at CaptainCon, are the 40s disappeared. So I scored the cash immediately, and I went up 2 points, and I'm up like I think it was 3-1 or whatever. And at some point I realized like I can't win on scenario. That we're just sitting on in the middle of the table. I can't ever score both 50s, and we're both scoring our own flags because they're pulled way back into our deployment, and the cash is gone, and there's no 40s on the left side of the table. So there's no way to really get up on scenario and win that way.
Yeah, it almost takes a win con out of it because if you look at the scenario, all the elements are like so close together. Like the 40s are practically on top of each other, the 50s are super close, and the caches are like whatever, you pick them up and they go. It like if you're a player that relies more on those scenario victories because attrition wise, it's just like my army cannot go head to head, maybe with like Winter Corps, right? It's I don't know. It's not the best feeling, I guess. But it feels like it takes a win condition away, depending on which one of these scenario elements you nope out.
Yeah, it's definitely taking me a little bit back to the drawing board because that's definitely my play style of I force you to come to me based on me going up on scenario if I can help it. That's usually my plan A. If that's not on the table in the scenario, I have to adjust how I play the game essentially.
Do you like find that with how these scenarios are set up, like it's completely changing? Like, are you doing like an armor skew and a general list, or you're like, I need a list for these three scenarios and like a list for these three scenarios now?
No, I think the most important thing about list building for myself anyway, I know everybody thinks about this differently, is you're bringing two lists and you want to either ask a bunch of questions with a list or answer a bunch of questions with a list, and you're basically targeting your list at saying what can't this list handle. And a lot of the times your first question is you're talking about opposing armies. You're not talking about the scenario itself.
Mm-hmm.
Building your lists around not losing on scenario. I think Erica's had to change hers a little bit just because there's 50s everywhere, so you can't take a ghast and nothing else.
Hey, we still playing Blimp Dusket.
The blimps can score 50s, right?
Yes.
So, so I think in that aspect, you have to sort of think about what is scoreable in that scenario, but I don't think you build an entire list around the reality of that scenario. That's just my opinion.
Okay. And then your final one was trench warfare. Personally, when I read over this, I liked it where they were exploring with the idea that your objectives would give you benefits, because I haven't seen that. It felt very much like the Mark III objectives where you'd have like Pathfinder or heal or magical weapons. So it was kind of neat to like see like a little bit of a callback to that, and that they're like experimenting with, okay, what's happens if we give us cover and blast resistance? Okay, what else can we maybe do with this going forward?
This one's actually my favorite out of the new ones. So you don't score your own flag, but you get 2 points for getting your opponents. So it rewards like battlefield aggression, which I like. That's something in Brawl Machine. Not to plug it, but I will. It's a very, very fun format. But I like that. That's something that comes up a lot in those scenarios where if you're scoring your opponents, you're getting 2 points. Yeah, I don't know. I really like this one. This one's a lot of fun.
I also find this one the most interesting. So because you don't score your flag, it sort of becomes this defendable piece of terrain for you where essentially you're going to be pushing up the right side of your board. Your opponent's going to be pushing up the right side of their board because that's where your cover and blast resistance and where the easiest places for you to score are. The game within the game becomes how much are you leaving behind to defend your own flag. It just sort of becomes this game of like assault your opponent's bunker, essentially, right? Where you're trying not to let them score your 2 free points on your side of the board while you go for that the other 2 free points on the opposite side. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and then I want to like most of these scenarios are symmetrical in design, except for maybe what was it what was it? Was it Wolves or Palo? Whichever one had the flag that was in it, right?
Oh, that's 2 fronts.
2 fronts, but I mean, like, so they're relatively still symmetrical, and not really practicing asymmetry. Like, where do you think the design direction is going? Do you think they're just like experimenting? Do you think that we maybe will see like more like trench warfare related stuff going forward? Like, I think they're just trying to like to figure out like what is going to be the best delivery or the best product, while like still like experimenting like with like what they can do with these 40s and 50s and these objective elements.
I think since we're talking about trench warfare, what I do like about it is the objectives giving that cover and blast resistance bonus, because like single wound infantry going into this year might find it difficult with all these like colossals coming out and how lethal guns are in this edition. So it's cool to see tools embedded in the scenario to help some armies make it to combat.
And it's also that the cover blast resistance only works on your own stuff. Like, you can't go over to the other objectives, all your opponent's objectives, and get that same bonus, right? Like, it's only on your own. Yeah.
And it's only for 30 and 40 millimeter models, I believe, not 50. So your big boy casters, your cav won't benefit from the objectives.
Yeah, all the new scenarios are complicated, but I think they realized at some point that the movement of a lot of these objectives was a little bit wonky and could start arguments very quickly.
I think it was too much cognitive load too, because there was a lack of consistency. So one thing I do like about this packet compared to last year. Oh, we didn't even talk about the actual display of the packet. It's beautiful. Like, I love how the maps are very clear. The objectives are a lot easier to identify with the measurements. Like, the packet's beautiful.
There's a lot less reading before you even look at the map, which is good.
Yeah,
It's
like
very to the point.
yeah, like the consolidation of information. Yep. And then with vocabulary and rules kind of all falling under the same umbrella, I think is big. Like, contesting is always within 3 inches if it's a terrain objective piece, or if it's an obstruction piece. So I dig it. I love that. I like that less stuff moves, because again, with battle lines and some of these other ones, we could say time after time again that even though we've played these scenarios a bunch of times, it's the 40 does this in this one, but it does something different in this other one. I'm glad that we have a little bit of separation, and that they've unified a lot of these rules under the same umbrella.
Yeah, I think it's good. I'm just like wondering what it's going to be like for the next one, because if it's usually what they do is that they will keep like half the scenarios and remove the another 3. I'm just like trying to remember from like the older Steamrollers if like some of them were just like around forever. Like Spread the Net was like around forever ever. So like, and I'm feeling like maybe like Two Fronts is going to be like the new Spread the Net. It might make it to every single like Steamroller going forward. Or maybe like taking like a payload or something and just like slightly tweaking it, or what have you.
I forget who we were talking to at CaptainCon, Andy, when the first day we got there, but it's kind of sad they took the 2024 Steamroller out, because someone was saying, oh, would it be cool if you did like a greatest hits Steamroller? Like, let's say you do love battle lines, like you just throw in all the banger Steamrollers from year after year. Maybe that becomes a packet.
Yeah, I think they just wanted to make sure people don't get confused of what is the legal thing to run right now for tournaments, like that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, if anything, at least like still have like War Table, so you would still be able to go look up the maps, but trying to remember all the rules though, as these new packets come out, you may not remember every single little tiny nuance with it.
Oh, speaking of War Table, can we just take a second to acknowledge how awesome the War Table community is in getting the updated objectives and maps up there for everybody to use? So as somebody that uses War Table a lot, thank you so much for updating the website. You guys rock.
Cool. All right, well, I think that was everything, unless there's anything else you want to go talk about with the Steamrollers. I think it's going to probably get us to the end.
Yes. When we had speak of the new Steamrollers, so our poll on Patreon for our first battle report for the year is going to be Color Guard. So that is the one that we're going to be filming with Rick in a few days.
I'm excited to see that when it comes out.
And it's going to feature one of the brand new Nova tables, Carver Town.
Oh my God!
Neat. Okay. Was there anything else that you two wanted to share?
But no, we're still like in con recovery mode. I'm still trying to kick a cold. Sorry for the low energy right now. No, we're just we have Adepticon coming up in the next couple weeks. There's a ton of Steamrollers that are popping up all over the place. So and thank you to all the TOs who are using things like Longshanks, who can advertise that stuff and see what's out there. But yeah, we got Adepticon coming up. We got a new battle report we're filming. Yeah, I'm really excited for this year.
I'm real excited for that keynote that they're going to go share at Adepticon with all the whatever exciting behind the scenes stuff that they're going to be working on. I know like the Lords of Umbri, Gravediggers is going to be coming out soon, so hopefully we'll be able to see more concept art and like models of like those armies whenever they come. I'm honestly just waiting to see what the second Orgoth and the second Dusk army is going to go be.
Those guys are down the road. We'll see how it goes.
Just gotta wait. Stay tuned for when the battle report drops. Hopefully, if we're gonna be recording it this week, maybe we'll be like out definitely at least like later on in February, so you'll be able to see that soon. From all of us here in Delaware, thank you so much for giving us your time. We'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.